Hello, you're very welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of the Finalwhistle.ie League of Ireland podcast. I'm your host, Kieran Callan, and here's what we have coming up on today's podcast. Dean Zambra of Bray Wanderers will be talking about his return to the club and under a new guise with the merger of Cabinteely and Bray Wanderers. We'll be having an in-depth discussion about his experience in the League of Ireland, but also with the League of Ireland going forward and what he feels needs to happen in order to keep the large crowds and the large capacities in our grounds going. We'll then be having an in-depth review and preview of the League of Ireland fixtures with my friend and correspondent on Finalwhistle.ie, Diarmuid Kearney. It's going to be an in-depth discussion of what's happened both in the Premier Division and in the First Division, of what happened last week and what's happening on this Friday night's action. So stay tuned to the programme. It's going to be a good one. Coming up next is our guest, Dean Zambra. I'm delighted to be joined by Bray Wanderers and Bray Cabinteely. I don't know what way to pronounce it, but we'll call it Bray for now. And Cabinteely defender Dean Zambra. Dean has been a guest of the show. He's been also a content producer of the show as well here on Final Whistle. So we're delighted to have him, and it's delighted to talk to you again, Dean. It's been, as I was saying to you off the air, it's been a while, but it's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you again, Kieran. I think you were mentioning it was the playoff a couple of years back, the last time we kind of spoke officially. So, yeah, lots happened since then. A move of club and a season in the Premier Division, and a couple of different changes for myself, obviously, in that time.
If we can just start with your time at Bray now. At the moment, you've just the season that started. Two very, very difficult defeats at the beginning. I say when you looked at the fixture list, I say you were just sitting saying to yourselves, oh God, it couldn't have got off to a worse possible start when you've got supposedly the big three in Waterford, Cork and Galway. But what was a very, very difficult first night for you was followed up by what could be described as a very spirited performance against Waterford, a difficult night for you made for them. How have you summarised just from going back to the club, and how have you summarised this season so far? Was it always going to be that kind of season of transition for everybody?
Yeah, I think there's obviously transition to be expected. You're merging two squads of players, but you're also bringing in new signings as well. So almost three different groups of players. And I think specifically the three clubs you mentioned are bringing back a lot of continuity. So I think that's the challenge for us kind of in the first part of the season is how do we gel and how do we get the right group on the pitch. First game was a strange one, statistical anomaly. I think they scored every time they had a shot kind of thing. And maybe we were a little naive, just a little bit disjointed with it being our first game. I think take out the goals, and I know that sounds stupid because it ends up 6-0, but there wasn't a huge amount in the game until that run of goal kind of thing. So we were obviously bitterly disappointed with that, and the outcome looks poor in the end. The second game then, as you mentioned, a more spirited performance, more organised, more time together, so we're gelling a little bit more. Huge amount of work going in behind the scenes every week, and it was a better performance. But again, we're disappointed. We're not looking at it saying, well, Waterford, we can't get points, or Galway, we can't get points, or Cork, we can't get points. We expect to get points, so we're disappointed that we came away with a 1-0 loss. And again, probably a 50-50 game. Maybe Waterford slightly edged it, specifically in the first half when they got the goal, but other than that, I think it was quite even, and definitely gives us positive things to build on for the next few games.
You've got Galway coming up next. John Caulfield had a welcome return, back to Turner's Cross. He was also got a very, very big victory. They're a team that, petered off at the end of last year. They'd be hoping to keep that, to have that very good momentum at the start of this season. They hope to bring it to the end. But the way I always look at it, and the way that the First Division has always been, it's the most competitive First Division that I have seen in a long time, is the first point I'm going to make. And the second thing is that these teams are going to have to slip up somewhere. No, I'm not saying that you're a team that, is just there to slip, kind of the big boys up. But you have to make your own stamp on things, because you are a new club and you are a new entity. But more importantly, you've got to, as players, I suppose, you're looking to, show that you can compete. And this isn't going to be the kind of the expected horse race that people are looking for.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, we're in it to try and win as many games as we can. We're here to compete. We're here to try and get points in every game. As you said, it's a very, very competitive league. I think everyone probably thinks they can beat everyone on every given day. The couple of clubs you mentioned obviously have kind of a little bit more continuity, probably bigger budgets. some of them are full-time, so they're expected to do better and to be more consistent as the season goes on. But from our point of view, we want to, as you said, compete, but we want to, pick up points, pick up results. We want to challenge. We're not in it to come fourth, fifth, sixth, that way. We're here to win as many games as we can. And that starts on Friday in our own place against Galway. Very difficult game, difficult team to play against. John Caulfield, as you mentioned, always has his team set up well and, very professional outfit. So it will be a tough challenge for us, but we expect to be able to compete.
Pat Devlin is regarded in some respects as kind of like the godfather of Irish football. He's so well regarded as a coach and as a manager. Do you think he's bringing all that experience to Bray now, that hopefully that will start to show the green shoots are going to start to show soon enough?
Yeah, and I think Pat will tell you himself, he's doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes to merge the two clubs together. It's not just a case of putting 11 players on the pitch every week. There's huge amount of administration, there's gear, there's obviously a new crest, new branding, there's a lot of work gone into the stadium. So again, you're drawing on all Pat's experience as a football man, not just as a manager in that regard. And then obviously on top of that, he's managing the team as well, and we've built up a good backroom staff that will give Pat a hand doing some of the coaching and some of the preparation during the week. But there's probably no one really else in Irish football, maybe one or two others, that could deal with this amount of upheaval and combine it with putting out a competitive team every week. So I think he's definitely the right man to do this, and I think you will see a lot of the hard work coming to fruition both off the pitch and on the pitch in the next couple of months, and then over the course of the next couple of years there's big plans obviously in place to make it a really rock solid club in Irish football.
Dean, you played with Bray for, as you mentioned to me off air, you played with Dean for with Bray for a long time. It's a club that I think has always had enormous potential because of where it is. The ground, I always said it's the most coldest ground I've ever been in, apart from Oriel Park. It's always cold, no matter what time of year you go. But like, you've got that Arklow, South Dublin catchment, you've got the Dart, you've got all these things. You're just waiting for something to kind of really kick in to really draw crowds into it, because I think it's one of those clubs that I wouldn't call it a sleeping giant. I'd call it the potential next giant. As you said, if all the blocks were put together and it just took off.
Yeah, and I think if you look at kind of Cabinteely and Bray as single entities in that area, they were always going to find it difficult to be able to compete as standalone clubs. If you look at the last couple of teams that have won the first division are basically full-time clubs. You look at ourselves going up, Longford, that when we did actually go up, we were really undermanned, and it was a totally different league to probably the last time Longford were a Premier Division club. So I think these teams are starting to realise, like, if you want to compete and get to the top level and then play in that Premier Division, you have to be as strong as you possibly can. And I think that was grounds for the merger. Like, can you bring together two sets of fans in that catchment area, as you mentioned? Can you strengthen your squad by having one squad of good players rather than two squads of players separated between the two teams? So if they can grab onto something there, and I don't know what the answer is. Like you said, it was there for a long time before, and now I'm back again. I don't know what the magic switch is to get that crowd in. Maybe it's development work, maybe it's grassroots work, maybe you have to kind of put in the work behind the scenes for a couple of years before you get the fan base and before you start to see that come to fruition. But there's definitely a potential there for a big club and a strong club. And I think, again, what Pat has told us about the potential plans are exciting, and they definitely see a path to that strong one club model in that area coming through in the next couple of years.
I know that on another podcast, it was League of Ireland Central, that they were talking about the fact that clubs in the League of Ireland have now switched from first teams to clubs, so to speak, that they have an underage structure. Cabinteely's underage structure has always been deemed a very, very strong outfit, where you see the progression of under 17s and under 19s into the first team. Do you think that blueprint will help a kind of a conveyor belt of players going into the first team in the future years?
Yeah, I think it has to as well, because you need to have an identity with your underage teams. You need to have an identity as a club, and you need to be able to, as we mentioned with the catchment area, that South Dublin, North Wicklow area, you have to generate an interest for the people, like, to come through the academy and come through the structures there, that's what embeds people into what you're doing as a club. You know, if you're just drawing players, you know, that fall away from other clubs, maybe Bows or Shells or whatever, and you're just bringing them in after they've left another club, you don't really cement an identity in the area. It's just lads travelling in to play for the club and they move on maybe in a year or two. Whereas if you can bring through that conveyor belt of players, even if it's only a couple per season, it really sets down the roots within the community. People that, you know these, you know, players from young age start to come and watch them, and they stay around to watch them, and you know, it just has a knock-on effect then. And I don't know whether to use the word heroes, but if young kids are looking at players that they know from around their area that are playing kind of Premier Division football or League of Ireland football, and they see them on TV and they see the highlights and they see the goals packages on Twitter, social media, whatever it might be, then it does bring together that kind of club feel where people say, oh, I want to play for Bray Wanderers, Cabinteely, I want to play for that unit, I want to play for that team, I don't want to go and play for Dundalk because Dundalk have a great side and won the league the last couple of years, you know. So you generate that interest within your own community, which I think is imperative. And like something you'll find is a lot of people in South Dublin follow Shamrock Rovers, like, so that's naturally where the fan base goes to, you know, not too far from Tallaght. So you have to try and win that fan base a little bit, and it's very hard when Rovers are winning the league, and Rovers have a little bit of a kind of professional club setup where they have, you know, the star players or whatever you want to call it, and you have to compete with that a little bit, and you have to try and take some from Shamrock Rovers in that regard in terms of fan base, and even from players at that age group, like the younger age groups.
Judging from just your experience from Longford's playoff run, which, you know, you bet Shelburne in the final. I was at that game in Inchicore that time. Drawing from that experience, is it almost even more difficult to go through that process than even going to, like, I know that from winning the league, I know winning the league is absolutely fantastic, but the playoffs seem to be just this unpredictable entity that anybody could knock each other out. But from Longford's experience, you know, you kind of defied the odds an awful lot, even getting to the final and then going to win it. It was fairy tale stuff, and it was great to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think we were possibly underdogs in all three games. I'm not entirely sure what the kind of odds were on it, but we came into the playoffs poorly. We lost the last two games. We kind of limped in. Didn't really kind of have us nailed down as a starting 11 or a shape or a team. Like, we weren't kind of on the high rolling in with momentum. I think Galway had come in with great momentum, and we done a huge amount of work behind the scenes. Basically, we kind of went full time for the couple of weeks. I think it suited us that the playoffs that year went in that one game format where it was just knockout. And for whatever reason, we just captured that kind of momentum, that, you know, you lose and you go home mentality, and we were just able to win those games consecutively on the trot. Who knows, if you had to play home and away legs of all those games, would it have been the same? Would you have been able to be as consistent for 6 games rather than 3? Who knows? You know, we don't know. We just went through the format as it was laid out for us, and it was beneficial to us in the end. And I suppose even playing 2 of the games in UCD and one of them in Richmond Park probably benefited us as well a little bit, like, you know, rather than having to travel down to Galway or up to Finn Harps or whoever it might have been, like, you know, largely a Dublin-based squad. We were pretty much based in Dublin for those couple of weeks while we were playing those playoff games. So I think we deserve great credit, obviously, for knuckling down and really getting it done. And obviously the management and the coaching staff take a huge amount of credit as well for how they prepared us for those games. And, you know, it was just a sign of what that group could do when we were able to come together for those couple of weeks.
And do you think that that's something that you can draw on if Bray were to make it into that playoff spot, that you'd be able to sit there and say, you know, this is where we are, this is what we need to do? And obviously that would be something that you could draw to the younger players who might not have been in that position or might not be, this is their first time kind of dealing with this. From a mentality point of view, it's a very, very high intensity, you know, kind of period where, you know, it's going to be the slightest mistake that could cost you.
Yeah, well, like, you'd hope to draw on that experience and bring it in for the younger players. I've played 3 promotion relegation playoffs and won all 3, so
you're a lucky charm then.
Yeah, I'd hope to keep that going if we got there, you know. But like you said, it's really a mixed bag kind of when it comes to that. those playoff games. And it's just, you see it in the English Championship playoff games where there's so much on the line in terms of money and promotion to the Premier League, and it's just these mental games and mad aggregate scores and lots of things happening in the games. And we've had some degree of that as well in our own playoff games. And I think, in fairness, the format has been really good the last couple of years, and it's generated that excitement and buzz around the first division. So yeah, obviously if we get into that position, I'd like to be able to bring some of the experience and kind of pass it around the group, and hopefully whoever we may face if we were in the playoffs or whatever the case may be, if we can draw on some of my own experience and pass it around the group, I'll definitely try and do that. Yeah.
Finally, Dean, just a general League of Ireland question. I would say that COVID has helped an awful lot in this, but there seems to be, like you saw the attendance records in Cork, the idea of 5,000 fans at a first division match is completely unheard of maybe 2-3 years ago. There seems to be this, and you're hearing about Bows being sold out, Talca Park being sold out. Now, I'll bet some of those stadiums are kind of not at full capacity. They do have trinkets, but aspects of their stadium are not usable at the moment. But do you think that there has been, how would you say, a kind of a new love affair with the League of Ireland, with everything that's gone on? People have kind of become to appreciate it a little bit more, but also because people have been kind of stuck in their houses. I know I've been very lucky that I've been able to kind of go to games and stuff, but other people haven't. Do you think that kind of, how would you say, excitement and more kind of love for live football has come back in this country instead of maybe going over to England or just watching it on the TV?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a mix, like you said, with COVID and people being taken away from the games. But I think the clubs have done a huge amount of good work over the last number of years to promote games. Bows in particular now do an awful lot of good work in the community and promote the games and have had sellout stadiums. Rovers doing a lot of good work too. Cork City, as you said, are a big club, obviously in a big area down in Cork. So I think the clubs have really taken on the baton there with their own self-promotional stuff, which has been brilliant. I think the fact Stephen Kenny has gone into Ireland as the senior team manager has helped, because there's that little bit of groundswell of League of Ireland support kind of saying, look, let's come to League of Ireland games. This is where Stephen Kenny came from. This is where James McLean came from, Seamus Coleman came from, Shane Long, whoever it might be. And I think it's infiltrating the football and sports going people within the country to kind of say, oh yeah, I'll go and give a League of Ireland game a chance, and I'll get down to my local club. And like I said, maybe someone like Rovers and Bows a little bit are starting to resemble clubs across the water. Like, you go to the stadium and it feels like a stadium. It feels like a football match. It looks like a football pitch. It's big bright lights, and instead of, we obviously have a problem with infrastructure in the country in terms of the stadiums, but some of the clubs are doing really well at it, and they're making this match going experience similar to going over to games in England, and it looks and feels like professional football matches now, which obviously generates excitement for kids, and then fathers or whatever, mothers bringing their kids. There's obviously something there now that, like, the clubs have latched onto, and the longer that continues, the better, obviously, and like you said, there's a couple of different factors in there. People being away from games because of COVID is definitely one of them, but obviously the clubs improving their product as well, I think, is the main thing. Like,
well, listen, Dean, thanks very much. We hope to have you on maybe later on in the season, and we might talk if that playoff final comes to fruition. We'll hope to talk to you before that. But listen, the very best of luck, and thanks very much for talking to us tonight.
Cheers for having me on, Kieran.
No problem. And now for our next segment here on the League of Ireland podcast on Finalwhistle.ie, I'm joined once again by Diarmuid Kearney, Finalwhistle.ie correspondent, but also host of Around the Grounds here on a Friday and sometimes a Saturday night. Diarmuid, you're very welcome back to the programme. Delighted to have you.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks for having me on once again.
No problem. Delighted to talk to you. I think I spoke to you twice last week, so this is third time in the space of a couple of days. If we can just go through the results of last week, and then we'll hit the fixtures. So starting with match week 4. Draw to 4 rather, UCD 2. Then you've got Shelburne 0, Derry City 1, St Patrick's Athletic 1, Shamrock Rovers 0, Finn Harps and Bohemians drew 1-1, and it was 0-0 between Sligo Rovers and Dundalk. There's a couple of big results that have happened there in that game. Derry winning away from home, Pats beating Shamrock Rovers, but a packed out United Park defeating UCD 4-2. Which one do we dissect first, really?
I suppose we have to take a look at Shamrock Rovers. I suppose suffering 2 defeats so far after just 4 games now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any, alarm bells should be ringing that, Shamrock Rovers are in a crisis or anything all of a sudden. Last season, they ended up, they dropped a couple of points in the opening few weekends. Now, they were picking up points in terms of draws. They hadn't suffered a defeat quite as early as they had this year. But I know we mentioned it last week on the podcast where we were talking about it, and you mentioned about the title race this year looking very interesting. We've already seen Derry, of course, picked up the win last week. Shamrock Rovers, again, suffering another defeat against a team like St. Patrick's Athletic, who are, a rival of theirs. They're also taking on Bohemians this week, another Dublin derby. They don't want to lose points again. If they suffer another defeat this week, then you're asking questions going, can they do it already? 4 games in, you're already questioning, are they going to walk the season again this year? I know a lot of people had predicted it. I know we did as well, that it looked like Shamrock Rovers were going to be the same. They had strengthened their team. They still have the same model of what they had last year, the same 5 back in defence, the same philosophies up top. They brought in Jack Byrne. He's impressed, but they never looked like getting anything out of St. Pat's. I was watching the game. They looked flat. Jack Byrne took a free kick toward the end, and I think he drove it toward the corner flag in the end. He was aiming for goal, and it just completely went off target. They haven't looked. They've looked against the weaker teams. You could say they have looked as you would expect Shamrock Rovers to look, but against Derry, they looked flat. Didn't seem to have that bit of energy. That creativity in the middle looked a bit lacking. Then the goal that they conceded was sloppy, and then the last week against Pats, it looked very much similar. They just didn't look. They didn't look like the same team they were last year. They were a lot more enjoyable to watch last year. They looked like they were a bit more free flowing, whereas this year, it's like that creative spark just doesn't seem to be there at the moment for them, I think.
Also, the one thing with Shamrock Rovers last season was that they were relentless. Like, how many games did they win in that 85 to 90, 92 minutes? I think Longford were the kind of the side that unfortunately were the the victims of that. I think on 3 separate occasions where they conceded really, really late. But that is the sign of a team that's going to win you a league, that they just have that relentless spirit. It doesn't seem to have that same kind of drive. Is it a case that maybe because we've had a more kind of, more consistent, more normal preseason, more normal training compared to that of the previous 2 seasons, because we haven't had the COVID factor being put into it, so to speak, that either teams have caught up or that it's starting to show that little bit of a level playing field again?
I think it's more of the level playing field. I suppose the likes of Derry's recruitment this year has been fantastic. I suppose Shamrock Rovers have had really good recruitment over the last number of years, and I think last year it really showed where they had that depth in numbers. They were able to bring in, Graham Burke coming back, the likes of Richie Towell coming in. They had that bank balance. They could bring in those type of players, and bringing back in Jack Byrne again this year. They have looked strong, but I think that maybe the other teams mightn't have strengthened enough over the last number of years, but now they've kind of found their feet. Again, you could say, all right, with the preseason stuff, that we had that ability to do the preseason. Managers were able to sit down at the end of last year, dissect everything from the season, and say, right, look, we go again. The likes of Derry could turn around and say, look, we did well last year, but if we buy these players in, they'd already had agreed transfers by the end of last season, that they were saying, look, we're going to announce these players, they're coming in for next season, we're ready to go. And then they've led by example. They've done really well this season. You look at Dundalk as well. Dundalk done good business as well in the transfer window. Like, I'm not saying Rovers have either, but I just don't know where it went. It has gone wrong for Rovers so far, because as you say, last year they were ruthless, they were dominant. And you talk about late goals and how many Rovers games I had to do where you had to
the rewrite.
There's a couple of the rewrite. There's a couple of late goals going in here and everything like that, and I think that was just testament to their team last year. They looked hungry from the start, but this year, I know the opening night they looked strong, but they were up against a UCD team that had just came up. They've looked strong in other games, but when you put them up against Derry, they were up against it that day. They were up against it against Pats on Friday night. Now I thought they might get the win against St. Pat's, because they hadn't really looked as good as they could be at this stage of the season. And looking ahead to Bohemians on Friday, I just think that there definitely needs to be a couple of questions asked, maybe a bit of tactical analysis done on the games to see where where is it going wrong? Where could they develop? Is it a case that the 5-back worked last year, but maybe you need to do something else, that creative center of the field, you might maybe drop someone into a cam role just to have someone who could be able to ping ball to the left and right channels or something. But I know Stephen Bradley definitely knows what he's doing. To be honest, he's a league winner at the end of the day, so he won't be listening to me and asking and saying, "Oh yeah, definitely need to change my tactics," because he's after saying it. But there's definitely something amiss with that team, and I think that when they went to Derry had done their homework on them. They knew what they were like. They knew the type of team Shamrock Rovers were. And then when St. Pat's played them last Friday, it was just a case of, right, we're going to play behind the ball, not going to give you the space and the movements. We know you want to play out wide. We're not going to give you the space down the channels to cut inside. And then, it was just a case of, it was a great win for Pats. But I think most teams definitely had the benefit of that extra preseason. It's just going to be interesting to see what way now the season works for them. Will we see injury breaks? Will there be COVID cancellation games again this year? It's going to be interesting to see what way stuff plays out, to be honest.
Derry had a huge win in Dublin. I watched the game. It was very, very tight. I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I thought Shelbourne were extremely well organised. They pressed when they needed to. They were very disciplined in that approach. I think Damien Duff is starting to kind of get to grips with what is expected as a Premier Division manager. But the one thing he doesn't have that Derry City did have, and that was just that little bit of magic, and it came in the form of Patrick McElhenney. Now, listen, it's not the prettiest of goals that he'll ever score, but they all count. But it's those wins on the road, and it's those kind of victories that, in reality, they're going to be prices come the end of the season.
Yeah, I suppose as long as the ball goes in the back of the net, you don't care whether it comes off a shin, a head, whatever. As long as you get a touch and the ball goes into the net, it doesn't matter. As long as the goal is in there, you get the points off of it. Happy days. I think any manager in the league will be happy with that if their team scores a scrappy goal. Obviously, you don't want to concede them. You pull your hair out when you see a team defend a goal. It's not the prettiest of things to watch, but it was a tight win. I think a lot of people did write off Shelbourne, but Damien Duff has done a good job. They have been really good to watch. Results mightn't speak for themselves and where they're positioned in the table, but I think they have been a very interesting team to have back in the Premier Division. They've looked strong, and Damien Duff coming in as a first-time manager, he's definitely not got any, the lack of experience there or anything. He's definitely showing what he learned from all the managers that he's had at club level and everything, that maybe they've just brushed off on him, same philosophies and tactics and everything. They definitely have been a team that can test anyone, as we saw against Derry. 1-0 win for Derry against a team like Shells is a great result for them, testament to what Damien Duff has taught them. But for Derry, you'll take 3 points. Obviously, when they found out that Shamrock Rovers had suffered their second defeat of the season, you're definitely going to be happier coming home knowing that you've got your 3 points tonight, but it's also seen you climb up the table, and now you can build on that for the next week and know that Rovers are going to be chasing you now. So it's all a case of, it's in your hands. If we continue this form, we can bring the title home. So definitely Derry will be front runners now going into this weekend. It'll be interesting to see, can they keep this form up throughout the rest of the season? But I think with their management team and the quality of their players, if McElhenney can get more goals, maybe different to what he scored on Friday night, but definitely if they can get anything into the net, they'll be happy with it, to be honest.
Derry City put up an interesting tweet during the week where it showed the comparison between this year and last year. The bottom two teams last year were Dundalk and Derry. The top two teams this year are Dundalk and Derry. So it just goes to show you what a difference a year can make in football and in sport. But turning to Dundalk, they had just from my own personal viewpoint, they played. I thought they played well in parts. The pitch was extremely difficult. I know there was a lot of complaints made about it, but that's their second clean sheet in a row. Their defense is starting to look that little bit more solid. I think, however, they're still missing that little bit of balance in the back four when it comes to Sam Bone is currently playing as a right-sided left back, which probably doesn't help matters because he's also playing, his natural position is a centre back. Dara Leahy, the initial prognosis was that he's going to be back for the next game. since then it's been the next game and the next game. We're not too sure whether when Dara's going to be back. He has been doing light running, but he sat literally right beside me in the stand on Saturday evening, along with John Mountney, so who's also another player that has to come back. And from conversations that people have had with John this year, is that he has said, despite the fact during his initial time with Dundalk, he said that he's coming back now and he's going to be playing in a right back position. So that leaves the questions up to young Lewis McCarry, who's in on loan from Stoke City. What's going to happen then when John comes back into the fray? Because John's Mr. 7 out of 10, no matter where he plays. You know, he's one of those players. But the one good thing that can be taken from that game especially is that strength of Andy Boyle and Mark Connolly look to be a very solid partnership. The midfield is looking very, very strong. I think a game like that showed a different side to Stephen Bradley. He had to show his more creativity side. He had to set more chances up and trying to take a goal, tried to take the goal himself. He nearly had, the 3 in a row of cutting in onto his left foot, but it didn't happen. But it's still, at the same time, I think sometimes in a couple of those occasions when they were pressing really high, they were left very, very exposed at the back, which left Sligo Rovers to attack. I think there was a case of Sligo's wastefulness at times, but also a little bit of inconsistency and ring rusty because it's their first home game of the season, coupled with the pitch. I think a 0-0 draw was a fair result, but at the same time, Dundalk will feel that they created more of the clear-cut chances. And I don't know why he wasn't on the bench, but I did say, my father was sitting beside me at the game. I said halfway through the second half, this is prime for David McMillan to come in. And unfortunately, McMillan wasn't there, which meant that kind of extra attacking option wasn't available. But all in all, I think a 0-0 draw was a very fair result. But something that I will take away from the game that probably I haven't seen, because for the first time this season, I've just been able to go and watch the game more than anything else. We never replaced Robbie Benson when he left. We've got Robbie Benson back, and he's a completely different player. He's given a more free role, but he's more, consistent in his attacking. He's more intelligent. He's a very intelligent guy at the best at times. We all know the history behind that. But I think there's more intelligent aspects to his play, which has really, really helped things along. And I think that that's going to be very, very fruitful in the future, going into in the next couple of games. But they play Shelbourne this weekend. But there's 2 other games that I want to talk about. Drogheda United had an open match. Anybody who wanted a ticket could get a ticket. They went in and they were hit with a goal fest, but UCD were hit for 4. It was another difficult night for the students.
Yeah, I think UCD are going to struggle this season, to be honest. Making a step up to the Premier Division is never easy for any team, to be honest, when you're coming up as a promoted side. But when you're a team like UCD, where I suppose a lot of your players mightn't have the same experience as what you're coming up against. You look at that Drogheda team, a lot of players who have had, there's mileage on them in the league. They've got that experience, whereas, the young students aren't as prepared as you'd hope for around this level. Now, they still give a good showing. I know one of their goals was an absolute joy to watch. I can't remember who scored it, but it was an absolutely fantastic. I was watching the highlights back of it, and they do have talent in their ranks, but I think Drogheda are just that team that they've been around the league for so many years now. They know how to grind the results. Head in the Game Park can be a tough venue to go to for any team in the country, to be honest. And they can get their results. They can finish mid-table. They won't probably have to worry about relegation this year. I'd say they can just about survive it. But UCD, in spells they can show it. Of course, they were hit for 4 again. They haven't really got a good record so far this year in terms of their goal difference. But it's still early days yet. I wouldn't be panicking for UCD yet. Of course, it more than likely will be between them and Harps for 9th and 10th. To be honest, Harps again looking a bit wayward so far this season. But if UCD can kind of get the rub of the green, I think they could maybe snatch the playoff spot if they can. It all depends. Look, can they get the form? Can the younger lads make the step up? Can they show their qualities to say, look, here's what I can do for the team? Can you make a difference in that section? But I suppose the biggest thing to come out of that game obviously was the attendance, the free tickets. That was a great thing to see, and definitely a good promotion for Drogheda and the league as a whole, to say that, come to the game, it's free, and then you're treated to a 4-2 spectacle. And it was an enjoyable game to watch in the end. It wasn't just like, your dead rubber 0-0 draw. Or, it was high scoring, good tempo to it. It was very, very entertaining. And, definitely, if you were in the facility and you got a ticket last week, you were definitely treated to a very good game. And, some people that are around the Drogheda area might consider coming to head in the game park again for another game. You never know.
I think Conor Hoy, the chairman of Drogheda United, said you couldn't write it any better, to be honest with you. Just to finish up the fixtures, Bohemians drew 1-0 with Finn Harps. I think there was a controversial decision near the end where Promise Amacheri was sent off in a clash between two players, and he was given a second yellow card. That does have implications because he could, I'm not too sure how the suspension list will work, but he could be suspended for this game against Shamrock Rovers now on Friday night. You can't, in a game like that where you're kind of meeting a team that's kind of on a bit of on a rope that's looking for a win. You can't be losing players like Promise. He's just an exceptional player, really. At times he's frightening.
Yeah, I suppose he has been that player that's came in and filled the void left by Georgie Kelly. Last year, without him in the team, you would have said, you're going to struggle. Now with Promise in the team, it's a case of, you've got that player, you've got the talent, he can do a lot of things for you. If he's not going to be playing on Friday night, that's a huge, huge void. When you're going up against your rivals, you never want to be weakened. And, to go in there without a player like Promise who has that goal scoring touch that you need, especially when you're coming up against a team like Shamrock Rovers, who've got a good defensive record, who've got just strong players inside there, that you want a player like him who can be dynamic, be creative, but also be a goal scorer at the same time. Now, a lot of people will say, if you watch the clip back, was it a second yellow? Should he have been booked? People will be, on the fence with it. You're either for or against it, to be honest. But, maybe if he is suspended for Friday, can Bohemians launch a late claim to say, look, can we appeal it, whatever? If you're coming up against, if it was any other game, you might say, look, we'll take it for the game, if he's just out for one game, we'll take it. But
not against Rovers.
You don't want to,
no,
especially with bragging. You've bragging rights. You've everything on the line. If Shamrock Rovers win, they have a good chance going back on the top of the table if Derry don't get a result. But Bohemians would love nothing more than to beat their rivals and also make sure that their rivals are, left chasing ground for a title charge as well. So you never know, to be honest.
Yeah. Just going very quickly, we're not going to dispute, we're not going to be dismissive of them, but the first division results, Cove Ramblers did very, very well to draw against Treaty United. Galway United drew 2-0 with Waterford, and once again, we're talking about these teams, and it's always going to be a case of someone who slips. Then you've got Wexford winning against Athlone Town. Our little bit of a prediction that there could be the surprise package of the season could be coming to the fore. And then Longford drawing in their first game. We had Gary Cronin on with us last week, and he spoke very, very well and spoke very passionate about his time at Longford. They drew 0-0 with Cork. So, I mean, as things stand, it's kind of as you were a little bit. Nobody kind of got the big result that they needed. But I think Treaty might see that as 2 points dropped, a bit of lost ground in some respects against Cove.
Yeah, I suppose it was their second game of the season. Of course, their game the week previous was disrupted due to poor playing conditions down in the Markets Field. I suppose when you put all the prep work into taking on a team on a Friday night and then there's no game and then you're left chasing it, you're going, okay, we're going away next weekend. We're down to Cove. Your mindset changes from we're playing this team to we're not playing this team. Now we're going on to a different team. Cove did very well. They worked hard to grind out the results. They managed to get a point at home. Great result for them. But, you do say that about Treaty, that, Tommy Barrett definitely wanted to go there and get 3 points. It was definitely something to build on where, we want to lay down the foundations early for a title charge or try and get up the table as quick as possible. They haven't really done that so far this season. They've just kind of stalled a bit to start with, whether as you look at the likes of Waterford, who've been performing well. Of course, they drew against Galway now. I suppose for both teams, you could say, you take a point against each other in terms of a title picture. Obviously, Waterford would have liked to keep their winning streak going. Now they're still unbeaten in the league. And then you have the likes of Longford who came out and showed that they can get a result against Cork. But, for a team that did come down last year from the Premier Division, people said that it was a good result that they got a draw against Cork. Now, I don't know what, this is Cork's second year down on the first division. If you're a team coming down from the Premier Division, should you be winning these games? Or, but look, it's your opening game of the season. It was a fairly, it was a course of the 0-0s last Saturday when we were doing around the grounds. You were at the 0-0 with the other 0-0 as well. It was just like, watching it back, there was spells of attacking intent from both teams, but they just didn't look like they were going to break the deadlock. I don't know whether it's just a case of Longford were just really good defensively, but they just couldn't really get that final spark, or did both teams' defenses just kind of balance each other out, and neither of them looked like they could snatch a goal at the end. But I think most of those teams will be happy, but I do think the team happiest from last weekend will be Wexford. You mentioned there about a surprise package. I was completely writing Wexford off at the start of the year. I didn't think they would be competing with the likes of, a Waterford team who are, intent on going straight back up, a Cork team who've built over the last 2 years, or, Galway who, are kicking themselves that didn't go up last year instead of UCD. And a Treaty United team who are, this their second year, but, they showed what they could do last year. Wexford have impressed. They're definitely a team to watch. And, if they get another result again this weekend, you could definitely see them, saying, to the bigger lads there, there's definitely another team around, not just the 4V fighting for the title. We're just going to sit up here at the top of the table and let you kind of argue who you think will win the league, and we'll just get
who's going to win the
playoff.
playoff.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're going to go straight on to the fixtures before we go on to we're going to have a topic discussion. It's probably the first time we're going to delve into a couple of things about the League of Ireland, but Shelbourne are playing Dundalk in Talca Park. That's going to be a very, very interesting game. Then you have Drogheda United versus Sligo Rovers. Then UCD are taking on Derry City. Finn Harps are at home to St. Patrick's Athletic with an 8 o'clock kickoff, and then obviously Shamrock Rovers versus Bohemians in the Dublin Derby. Taking away the obvious, the Dublin Derby is going to be the one that's going to have all the headlines, all the reports, everything like that. Is there any other game that's standing out for you?
I mean, I suppose, like you said there, everyone's eyes are going to be on it now. Obviously, it is the 8 o'clock kickoff. I mean, there is other implications in the league, to be honest. I mean, look, Shelbourne and Dundalk, another home game for Shelbourne. Can they get a result against Dundalk? I don't think they will. I think Dundalk, they need to try and get the 3 points again and get that result. UCD taking on a very strong Derry team at home. Based on Derry's form recently and the way UCD have performed, I do think Derry will look to leave the capital with a result, to be honest. I can't see UCD getting 3 points. I could see them holding them to a scoreless draw if they can just one of those nights where you keep it nice and tight and compact at the back, and you just make sure that Derry can't play down the wing or try and cross it in, or get that type of tactics on you. It'll be interesting to see as well. And of course, Finn Harps, they taking on St. Pat's. I don't know how well Finn Harps have adjusted so far this season. St. Pat's, of course, with the result last weekend, they'll be looking to say, we got a great 3 points last weekend, good performance against the team that are the current champions, everyone's favourites for the league again this year. We're going up against a Finn Harps team that are probably one of the favourites to be relegated.
But the thing about Finn Harps, the one I noticed when they were playing Dundalk was that they pressed and pressed and pressed Dundalk. Mihalovic was very, very impressive. But Dundalk then, very much against the run of play, scored, and it was just like a domino effect. It just they not saying that the heads dropped or anything like that, but they couldn't get that pressing momentum again, no matter how much Ollie Horgan tries. And Ollie Horgan is a very astute manager, and he's very, very good at his job, and I'm not taking away, but it seemed to be a case that they just, not that they gave up, but they kind of could sense what was coming. They kind of went on a wee bit of a press in the start of the second half, conceded then 2 very, very early, like they conceded from Sambone after 45 seconds in the second half, and then there was the third goal. It was how would you say, inevitable that it was going to happen. And the thing is that the longer that they hold Pats out of goal and how they hold out a result, it could get more frustrating, because Finn Park is a very frustrating place to go at the best of times. I think that that's something that they need to look at, is that they need to make Finn Harps a very difficult place to go. I don't know if you've ever been. Fans are right on top of you. It's a really, really tight pitch, and they've made it their home, so to speak. And I think a lot of teams don't like going there, so that's the kind of attractiveness for them. And I think that that's something that could hinder Pats going into it, like Inchicore at the best of times. It's very similar to Ballybuffet in that regard, that the fans are on top of you and stuff like that, but it's a different breed up there. It really is. The fans are right on top of you. They're on top of you from the moment go. And if you're not of a strong disposition when it comes to mentality and terms of playing and sounding that out, it could become a very difficult 90 minutes.
Yeah, I haven't been up there personally. I think it's one of those grounds that I do want to visit eventually. It's just one of those, those old, like, historic pitches, a bit like Turner's
You
Cross.
go for the soup, just to let you know, you go for the soup.
It's one of those. I was watching a couple of games last year at Finn Park, and you're all about like tenacity. Like, they can press you and they can make you work for games, but then there's that one thing, and Harps can concede late, they can concede anything. And I think, if St. Pat's play like that, where, we know what we're going to get here, we're just going to pass it around. If you're going to press us, we'll whatever. But if we can just, get a ball in behind, if your defense is open, it's going to be curtains for them. But it's all going to come down to tactics at the end of the day. And Ollie Horgan definitely knows what way he wants his Finn Harps team to play. It's just whether they can, pin back in St. Pat's, cause them to have issues. And I think they'll be happy with a point. But, stranger things have happened in Donegal. You can definitely see 3 points coming out of this game if they manage to hit the front early and just, pin them back in. But look, it's going to tell. We'll know Friday night what the story is with that game. But based on form, Pats look, I suppose on paper you could say Pats look sure to take the 3 points. But going to Ballybuffet against Finn Harps, you never know the result, to be honest. It's one of those grounds that any other team, you'd probably be able to anticipate it, but you never know what you're going to get with Finn Harps.
Go to the first division fixtures. You've got a Southeast derby between Waterford and Wexford. Then you've got Bray Wanderers versus Galway United, Cork versus Cove Ramblers. So the first of the South derbies, and Treaty versus Longford Town. Cove and Cork, big game there. And then you've got Wexford and Waterford. Treaty will be looking to get points against Longford, and Bray Wanderers are playing Galway United. If I was going to be honest here, I think the FAI have done something really, really good here in terms of their fixture listings. You've got a load of derbies packed in, and that's something that can be really, really well packaged, which is something that we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. But if I was to pick one game out of there, it has to be Wexford and Waterford, because you've got the team that could surprise everybody versus the team that everyone just expects to win the division.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the derbies, that Southeast derby there, two teams that are, they definitely want bragging rights over the other. We mentioned there a few minutes ago about Wexford being that surprise package. You go to the RSC against Waterford, you come home with the win there. That's rubber stamping your name, is saying, they look like a title contingent team, or a team that definitely could go up. Waterford, I don't think they were happy with the result last week against Galway. Now, you are going to Eamon DC Park, which is a tough place to go as well, especially in the first division last year. It was a tough place to go for most teams, but it looks like to be that game this week. But when you look at Galway, will have their own game. Galway can get a result out of it, and there's a share of the spoils down in Waterford. It could be one of those things where there's that little questions of what's going to happen here. If Cork City can get a good result against Cove, that's great for them. Treaty and Longford both on a point so far. Can Treaty get their win? Can they kind of get their season back onto to winning start? They're back down on Shannon's side, so hopefully they can get a result there. Longford, of course, you mentioned, they look they can look strong at times, but can they get the results? They suffered last year. Can they get back to winning ways this year? It'd be interesting to see, but definitely, I agree with you that the standout fixture there does look like to be the game between Waterford and Wexford. But you never know. We might see another goal fest in the first division this week. Those other games might entertain us, and it could be a 0-0 draw between Wexford and Waterford. You just never know. You can't write the league, to be honest. Sometimes.
No, curse of the commentator. Diarmuid, I'll be talking to you on Friday from Talca Park, as you've got Around the Grounds on the Final Whistle after each League of Ireland series of games. But thanks once again for your insight and your input, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Kieran. Pleasure to be on as always.
Yeah. That's our lot for this week. We hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. My thanks to Dean Zambra of Bray Wanderers and to Diarmuid Kearney of Finalwhistle.ie. You can catch Diarmuid and the rest of the Finalwhistle.ie reporters on match nights for Around the Grounds on the Final Whistle. Wherever you're going this weekend, I really hope that you enjoyed the League of Ireland action, whatever club you are supporting. I've been Kieran Callan. We'll see you next week. Take care. Goodbye.